Hey everybody, welcome back to a video episode. Today we're going to continuing series Model Museum, where I review every single Model 1, Model 2, and Model 3 arcade game in a retrospective fashion. That's not a racing game because we did that retrospective last year. And today we're taking a look at Behind Enemy Lines, a really interesting light gun shooter that honestly is pretty damn janky. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But Behind Enemy Lines has a really interesting story, and that is because it was developed by Real 3D, developers of some of the hardware in the Sega Model 2. Real 3D was wholly owned subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, so the people that developed this game clearly were not game developers, they were hardware developers that worked for a defense contractor. And that's not to say that this game doesn't have any redeeming value whatsoever. There is fun to be had, but as far as Model 2 games are concerned, I'm definitely going to say Behind Enemy Lines is my least favorite out of the entire platform. Right off the top, it is your run-of-the-mill paint-by-numbers light gun game, and I do not know why they decided to put a crosshair in the middle of the screen with two different lines, horizontal and vertical. It just basically interrupts the entire look of the game. I really wish in that respect they had not done anything like that. It's a very weird design decision and probably something that was developed and designed by people who didn't have video game best practices in mind. It's a small thing, but it's all I can see the entire time I play the game. Now on the shooting mechanics, it is sound, and it does feel like somebody at Sega, the D team, developed the game, because it does have that Sega vibe to it, even though it was not made by them, and I'm sure in the background Sega helped somewhere with some of the development, just giving them tips, because Real 3D and Lockheed Martin brought the hardware, Sega brought the development talent, so I'm sure they did get a little bit of help. Basically, the entire premise of the game is you're driving around in a Hummer and you are attacking the enemy. No surprise there that Real 3D went with a military shooter because obviously they make their money on things that go boom. And you'll see here this Hummer jumps the bridge there, and that is the entire cutscene for the mission clear. The game basically just stops and gives you that cutscene in a very abrupt manner. And the intro to each new level is just a little bit of text with some spinning polygons representing different barrels. You will see throughout the entire game I'm shooting different fuel and ammo pickups. You do need to get more ammunition for your vehicle as far as the rockets are concerned, and you don't want to run out of fuel, so it does make you pick things up the entire game, kind of like Operation Wolf from Taito did. And I will say it's not my favorite mechanic ever added into a light gun game, because when you're trying to shoot the enemy and everything coming at you projectile-wise, looking around the screen and trying to figure out where you need to shoot to get more fuel can be a little bit distracting, and honestly it's definitely, like you see here with the continue, a little bit of an attempt to get a couple more credits out of you before you see the end of the game. Now on the upsides, I will say that because this runs on the Model 2C, the final revision of the Sega Model 2, it definitely does look good. All of the textures are clear, there's a ton of polygons on screen. There is some jankiness in the animation though. Sometimes when things explode, there's only like 3 to 4 frames of animation before it just fades out of the screen. Watch for it in a lot of the exploding trucks. They have this staccato motion that I've never seen before in Model 2, and it really just doesn't make much sense to me. But this game does play like a great action chase sequence. When you're going through this factory here, shooting all of these trucks, going in and out of buildings, the game does have moments of greatness. I don't dislike this game. I think it's the worst game on Model 2, but I don't think there's really any bad games on the Sega Model 2, so it is still a fun time. And I do not remember ever seeing an arcade cabinet for this back in the day. I only know about it later on. I'm playing it here on Model 2 emulator, and it does work really well. The controls can be a little bit tricky to set up, so if you ever need help with that, leave me a comment down below and I'll send you a link to how I did it. But honestly, it is just one of those games. It's rare, it's exotic, and it was made by developers you wouldn't really expect. Just, Lockheed Martin developing video games. The hardware for gaming makes sense. Actually making their own game, a little bit weird, but I kind of love it because of that weirdness. And you will see here as we go further on in the level, I'm not doing many cuts here because I do want to show you guys kind of the navigation through the world. And I will say the soundtrack, for what it is, it's not really even there. There's barely any music, it's a lot of gunshots, but all the same, go ahead and listen and I'll be right back. Honestly, if you can't tell already, there's really not much soundtrack in the game whatsoever. It's a really strange choice from the developers at Real 3D, and I did ask a friend who owns an original arcade board for this if it was just an emulation issue, but they did confirm with me that that's exactly what you would hear on original hardware. And while gunshots and missile sounds do make sense contextually as far as the gameplay is concerned, it would be fun to have a little bit more music. You get it in the cutscenes here, and you do get it in the mission briefing, but when you actually get into the world, it's basically just sound effects the entire way through. But I do appreciate that Hummer just jumped that entire gulch. It definitely wouldn't have done that in real life, but I appreciate the kind of arcade physics they're going for here. And that's the thing about Behind Enemy Lines. It is not a bad game, it just doesn't really feel like a finished game. The lack of soundtrack, kind of the rudimentary shooting that feels like the third stage is just a reskin of the first. It just feels like something that the first time developers would have made, and I don't know that Real 3D made any other games in 1996. If you know of one, leave me a comment down below. And if you've ever seen an original arcade cabinet for this, leave me a comment as well, because I would be curious. But it just has all those vibes of an early development cycle, or almost like a kind of wonky iOS game where you just drag your finger across the screen to shoot stuff. But at least the shooting mechanics are sound. There's certain vehicles that you're really only going to be able to take down with those rockets, so you do need to deal with resource management, making sure you keep enough of them, because if you run out of rockets at the wrong time, you're going to have a very bad go of it in the game. It's one of those things. It does take a little bit of strategy. Like right now, I don't have any rockets left, so I do need to shoot that helicopter just with bullets, which takes a lot longer and leaves you open and susceptible to taking damage. Although I will say the game is relatively fair and maybe one of the least cheap games as far as Sega Model 2 games are concerned, because honestly I didn't use a continue until like midway through the second stage, and honestly I haven't played this game in years. I'm doing it for the retrospective. And as we get into this facility right here, it does really feel like the second stage I already showed you with the train tracks. It's slightly different, but it seems like this game has the cadence. Driving section, factory section, driving section, back into a factory section. I do like that you can explode some of the tankers in the background if you hit them just right, and they will explode. It is a nice little touch, but again, those physics, it does seem like there's some sort of math going on with their direction of travel. But the frame rate in which they explode, the animation just seems so unnatural even for a Model 2 game. It's just one of those things that always catches my eye, and it always slightly takes me out of the experience. It's not like I'm pretending that I would do this in real life, but when you see stuff like that, it does kind of seem ever so slightly janky. But it is the kind of fun jank where you're sort of like, how did that happen? And I do love that everything does explode. An explosion in a light-gun game is always good, and Behind Enemy Lines is definitely going to give you as many explosions as possible. And I do like this little sequence here where we're going through basically what looks like a mine shaft out into a road. You're always moving in this game, and I do appreciate that. It's never making you sit on the screen for too long shooting the same thing, which can sometimes be a complaint of mine with other light gun games where I feel like they artificially elongate the game by giving you a shooting gallery on a single screen. You'll see there I was able to finish mission 3. We're on to the last mission of the game. And I will also say this is not a long game whatsoever. I think it was 16 minutes from the start of the capture to the end of it, seeing the credits. But as we go through this last sequence here, I do love this train, but I will say that this game has the most disappointing final boss in any arcade game I think I've ever played, and I will show you that in just a moment when we get to it. But again, just going through here, those flame effects, a little bit wonky on the flamethrowers, but it does kind of have a vibe to it. This entire game is just one big vibe. It's like a C to C plus vibe versus a B or A tier vibe, but it does effectively convey what you're trying to do, which is shoot everything around you. And again, I love explosions in a light gun game, and the fact that everything is just blowing up always does make me happy. I just feel like maybe this could have used another 6 months in the oven baking, or maybe some more assistance from other developers in the arcade sphere that would have better been able to help Real 3D guide them through the process of making an arcade game. But I get it, it's a weird pivot. The developers of the hardware make a game, it is quite strange. And now you will see here we're at the final boss of the game. It is a bridge. You have to shoot every section of the bridge enough to destroy it before the train comes over. Now that makes a lot of sense in a military shooter for sure, but as far as the final boss in a video game is concerned, I really don't want to just shoot a bridge. I thought we'd have a gigantic battle with that train, kind of like Rail Chase 2 that I showed you earlier, but you just have to blow up a bridge. And honestly, maybe the bridge had it coming, we can't really say what's going on there. But here's the entirety of the credit sequence. It just says victory, and then it has this little bit of a blip there, and it goes to the mission complete screen. That is everything Behind Enemy Lines gives you story-wise. That is the video. Go and play this game, leave me a comment, tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.